Hey, this is Tiger. Welcome to my stream tonight. Hey AJ, nice to see you in the chat. Thank you for moderating the stream once more. And before we start, please heed the disclaimer. We are talking about playing a computer game here, even if we try to understand the regulatory and technical concepts involved as thoroughly as possible. We are only playing a computer game. It has nothing to do with the real world, and please leave the real trains and railway installations alone. What I wanted to do tonight is have a look at the French signaling system. We all know there is only one French DLC in the game so far in the train sim world. The TGV DLC called the LGV Méditerranée. And this is what we are going to play today. The TGV Train à grande vitesse is a nicely modeled train. Actually, I find it very relaxing to drive. And the signaling involved is obviously mostly cab signaling, but a couple of wayside signals are in the DLC as well. There was a notice on the forums that this DLC is given or was given or will be given away in May. I must have missed this week. Well, it was not so important for me because I bought it already long before May 2023. So it was not applicable for me, but anyway, I've somehow I missed this event, or it has not taken place yet. Don't worry, if you look at the corner in the top right, we are disconnected from Dovetail Live, but this is because they are down for maintenance anyway, so we cannot connect here. What I wanted to do today is to drive one TGV service and have a look at the stop sequence, the stopping sequence, green, yellow, red, and the different kinds of red signals that there are in the French system. And for that, we will take one service and wait a bit, and then we will actually be required to stop at a red signal. So before we really drive the service, I start the service once and go through the setup quite slowly, and then we restart the service and drive it properly with 1 minute delay at the start. And this should, at least this is what I've found out, or I think I found out with my experiments, will lead us in a situation where we will have to stop at the red signal and let two trains that are coming from the opposite direction pass at this point, so that we can actually see a red signal in action. So here we are in the cab of our TGV Duplex, the 200 series. That is a vehicle built in the 90s, more or less. Let's have a look from the outside. You can see it's really a big machine. We have two train sets. One train set is always a train set with 10 vehicles, 8 cars in the middle, and 2 electric locomotives on either end. And if you couple 2 of them together, like it happened here, then you have a really big train for taking passengers from Marseille to Avignon here, and obviously much further ahead. You have a first class, you have a second class in your vehicles. And the train is modeled very nicely, in my opinion. Let's see if I can get my free camera in it. No, I can't really get it in the train, but you can have a look inside through the windows. It's a duplex train, a double-decker for well, the high capacity that is needed on those lines. It is running from overhead catenary current, obviously, and it is actually a bit complex to set up. So if you just step into the cab and put the reverser to forward in the throttle after releasing the brakes, it won't move. So typically when you're taking over a service, the train has already set up insofar as that the battery is already charged. If not, well, I have to stand up for that. If it has not been charged already, here are two switches for the batteries. Battery, normal, normal. This is where you have to set the battery. Then there is one switch for the compressor. Those switches need to be set to normal, and then there is this switch for auxiliary power on. And if the train is freshly to be moved from the depot, sometimes you have to hold this auxiliary power on switch into the on position for a couple of seconds, and then you actually energize the power as much as that you can start the train. How heavy is this train? Just curious. Let's have a look at the pause screen. It is more than 800 tons, 808.8 tons and almost 400 meters long. So for a passenger train, this is quite a big thingy. What you typically need to do if you are taking over a service in a new cab, you have to push this service retention cancel button so that you activate the cab on this end. And then for getting power into the train after having energized the battery, you have to turn the master switch to on. Then you can see that all the indicators are lighting up. For a self-test, more or less, you can see that the doors are, not all of them are open. I just opened one with the camera, so I opened all of them now with this installation. That light here is from the Crocodile system running in the KVB display. It is flashing because I have not acknowledged the self-test. It's a bit like on the British trains where you have to push the AWS acknowledge button after the self-test. So do that here, the light gets steady, and if you want to turn it off, there is a clear light button. About the safety systems, KVB and Crocodile, I think we will have a separate video. We have talked about KVB already in the Javelin video, because the Javelin also uses the KVB system in the station area. You love that number, AJ, 808.8. Yeah, that is a good number. Let's hope nobody alights or embarks to destroy that great number. All right, we have cleared the light here. On the indicator you can see this purple thingy here that tells you that the power switch here, the power handle, you have actually one on either end of this console in the middle, is at neutral, at 0 at the moment. Every time you're not applying power or no brake force, then this indicator here lights up. So we have switched on the master switch. What we need to do now is to press the circuit breaker to switch it to on. Then you can see you get this red indicator telling you that the main circuit breaker has been switched to on, but it is not actually closed. But switching it to on allows you to operate the pantograph, what is in lower at the moment. And you can see that there is a pantograph mode selector that allows you to select between 3 different modes of getting the energy into the train. The C stands for the DC current, 15,000 volts direct current. Direct current from the overhead catenary is quite rare, at least in the game. Typically you get alternating current from the overhead catenary and direct current from a third rail with a much lower voltage. Here in the area around Marseille station, you will have a DC coming from the overhead catenary with 15,000 volts. So this is set to the correct position later on when we're actually going on the high-speed track, we will have to switch it to LGV, which stands for the 25,000 volts AC overhead that we are getting there. And the third mode that we have, the M mode, actually for the 15,000 AC volts that we need in the German net, for example. So this is a machine, a locomotive, then that can operate 3 different energy systems, and we can switch to the one that we need before we raise our pantograph, otherwise our machine will not work. So here in the Marseille area we will have to switch it to C or DC. That is 15,000 volt DC coming from the overhead catenary. So the pantograph selector that is typically at 0 here, so pantographs are down. So the right one is our train, you can see it is down, and we switch it to normal, and then you can see how it is folding upwards and connecting with the overhead catenary. AJ says, is it common in trains that things are so far apart in the train? I mean, like some buttons you need to press for a light on the opposite side of the dashboard. Well, it's a difficult question. I guess there are trains where it is arranged in that way, and on other trains it might be closer together. Depends on the original layout. Sometimes you need extra installations on the trains, so you just find a place where you can fit it in, especially with the old German Deutsche Bundesbahn locomotives and vehicles. There you sometimes have situations where you just put the button and the indicator where there is room for it. But I think in general they try to keep their stuff together. Sometimes you actually have situations where you put switches deliberately outside the reach of the driver, like the TPWS isolation switch on British trains, so that he cannot reach it while running the train, and he has to stop and stand up and operate it, for example. Now, back to setting up our train. We have raised our pantograph, and the indicators show us this here. There is a yellow indicator telling us that the aux switch is still open, and this green indicator here, I cannot really read it. No, I cannot really read it, but it is something that tells you that the pantograph has connected with the overhead catenary and that you are getting energy from it. And then you can push this button, the rearm circuit breaker, to actually close the circuit breaker. So you have a 3-step more or less. You have this left one circuit breaker to on, then pantograph up, and then the rearm, and then those indicators go off, and then you're actually have your train energized. What we always like to do, or what I always like to do, is turn on the gauge lights so that you can read them more easily. These are the indicators for the brake system. You have this big indicator here on the top. This is the system that tells you the status of your brake pipe. Typically you run with pressure in your brake pipe if they are released of 5 bars. Now it is at 3 bars. And you have a PBL brake system, just like on the Class 66, if you remember that. You have a lever that allows you to increase or decrease the pressure in the brake pipe, and if you let go of the lever, then it snaps back into a neutral position, and it freezes the setting for the brake pipe that you have there. So on the left side you have the brake cylinders, the pressure in the brake cylinders, and on the right side this is the main reservoir. So 7 bars, this is the air that we can use for a brake system. For testing, it is actually quite nice. It does not. It is not necessary to do that before you start your train. Well, it is modeled, so I like to actually use it. what you can do here is a brake hold button. This is more or less the parking brake for the TGV. If you hit this, then the pressure in the brake cylinders is frozen. It will not go out even if you change the pressure in the brake pipe, so that we can test the brake pipe and if it reacts to our input without the risk of our train running away. So this is the emergency brake plunger. We can just hit it and see that the pressure in the brake pipe drops to 0. Again, just like on the Class 66, the inner hand here, the white hand running on the inside of this dial, is the equalizing reservoir, and the yellow triangle is the actual pressure in the brake pipe that always lags behind a bit after the equalizing reservoir. Or actually, it's the other way around, right? It should be the other way around, because it was an emergency brake. The brake pipe pressure actually went out faster. Here, with this switch, you can activate and deactivate the brake lever. If it is deactivated, the blue light will light up. We do that, we press it so that we can check if it works. We can set the emergency brake plunger back to not depressed, and you can see that the pressure in the brake pipe climbs again according to the pressure in the equalizing reservoir. Now if I move the brake handle here, you can see it only reacts to putting it in emergency. But for applying and releasing, nothing happens because we have frozen it here with this switch. If we click the switch again and the blue light turns off, then we can actually move our brake lever and the brake pipe will react. So releasing, you can see the yellow triangle go a bit faster than the brake pipe, and applying, just like we have this on the Class 66 brake system, because it is a PBL system, a poussoir bouton locomotive brake system, where it works like this. So let's put it back to 4 bars so that we have a bit of a pressure in our brake cylinders even when we release the brake hold button. So that was more or less the test. You test the emergency plunger, then you release the brakes fully, and then you apply them to 4 bars. So you make a 1 bar reduction in the brake pipe. This one here is actually another brake system, but that is only for emergency situations when your main brake system does not work. This brake system here will also blend in the dynamic brake. If you want to use only the dynamic brake as a holding brake, you can use the power handle and put it, now I can't move it because I have not set the reverser, and pull it back so that you apply brake force. If you're applying brake force or traction force, you can see it here on this meter. This needle will go into T for traction if you're applying traction force, and F for frein, French brakes, if you're applying brake force, electric brake force. That's it. All right, what else is there to do? Reverser needs to be set to forward, and that is not enough. We also have to set the driving mode switch. There are 3 settings: couple and uncouple. That is for shunting. Manual control, that is what allows you to use the power handle for accelerating and braking. And there is a third setting, that is selected speed. Then you can use this speed selector here like a tempo mod to set a specific speed, but it does not work that reliably from what I have seen. So typically you would drive with manual controls on. The TGV does not have an AFB like the German trains, so it does not have a system that automatically accelerates and brakes according to the input. From what I've read, this is actually deliberate because they want their drivers to manage speed and pay attention to all that. So what we have not done so far is set up the security systems. There are 4 security systems here, and the switches are all on this panel on the back wall. The TVM is the system that gives you the cap signaling for the high speed areas, so this needs to be switched on. The Crocodile is a system that is a bit like the AWS system on the British trains. It warns you about yellow signals and speed reductions. And the KVB system is a bit like the access system insofar as that it controls your compliance with track speed limits. And the 4th one, where is it here? The VACMA, that is the vigilance device, like a CIFA on German trains, or the DSD and vigilance installations on British trains. So you have to push a paddle like those every now and then so that the VACMA system does not stop you. So you can see there is actually quite a lot to set up on this train before you start driving. And through this we will go a bit faster now, and then we can actually drive this train. One word about the French. I try to pronounce the French words as good as I can, but I apologize in advance for butchering your beautiful language. Yeah. I tried to read up the sources about the signals and stuff in French, and I think I understand it well enough. Well, obviously my French is not good enough to pronounce it with the beauty that this language actually carries. So, get started. What do we do? Service retention cancellation on the back door. The security systems, normal, 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 normal. Close the door again, sit down again. We can open our doors so that the passengers can enter. Now we have to use the master switch first. Then we can open the doors. Circuit breaker, check the panto mode. Raise the panto. As soon as this lights up, arm it. Acknowledge. Clear light. Brake hold. Emergency plunger if you want the gauge lights. Brake neutral switch. Depress emergency plunger, goes back to 3 bars. Check the lever, okay, nothing happens. Brake neutral switch released. Release the brakes fully to 5 bars. Alright, apply to 4 bars again. Brake seems to work. We can have the brake hold on until we actually have to leave. This is the button for closing the doors. We can do this now. Reverser is already on forward. Driving mode, manual control. And now we could just go. You get a signal like on a British train with the guard signal, bing, bing. And then you're good to go. You know, the doors have closed properly. Everything is set for departure. I wait until 12:10 deliberately so that we can see stopping sequence. Our signal, our departure signal is at green. What this NF means and this little white light we will see in the presentation in a couple of minutes. Release the brake hold, otherwise we cannot release the brakes completely. Release the brakes to 5 bars. Apply power. You can see in this accelerometer that the train is fighting to start. Also here this indicator is in the T range. Applying traction force. This other indicator with the plus and minus, I think I have never seen it move. There's a 30 limit when we're going out of the station. You can see that the KVB is active and giving us the dashes in orange and green. Again, we will talk about the KVB, I think, in a different video. What you can already see is that there are purple lights. We'll talk about them in the presentation part. You can see that there are sometimes red lights with 2 red lamps. Other signals have only 1 red lamp. Again, this will be in the presentation. What is the difference between that? 1 red lamp, 2 red lamps. Here, for example, a couple of signals with only 1 red lamp. You can already see that it has an F indicator, not an NF like the other ones. After having passed this signal, we can accelerate to 60. Speed limits are not actually signaled, at least not the speed limits here. There is some speed signaling. I think this will be the topic of a different video. Speed signaling on light signals and on signs. Now we can accelerate to 110. Again, I'm doing this only based on route knowledge. There are no signs actually for that, but you can see it here that the limit actually increases. So I hope our wait actually paid off, so that we are really getting a red signal. At the moment everything is green still. We're approaching the power changeover location, where we switch from our 15,000. And now the Crocodile is actually indicating an alert. You see that red lamp started flashing. I acknowledged it, so it is steady now, just like the sunflower in the AWS. I'm not accelerating anymore, and we can see we're approaching a yellow signal. And yellow signal, again, Crocodile, alarm. We will slow down, because the yellow signal warns us that we are approaching a red one, just like in almost every other system that there is. The KVB actually will control our braking curve and will stop the train if we are not slowing down enough while approaching the red signal. I'm coasting with 30 towards the red signal, because typically 30 is the first announced approach speed by the KVB. You will see that the KVB will show here on the orange left side 2 zeros, indicating an approach speed of 30 to the red signal, like we can already see here in front of the train. And when we're getting close enough to the red signal, the KVB will give us the 00 here. And then when we're getting really close, a 000 indicating an approach speed of 10 kilometers per hour. The moment we're still on the dashes. Here are the double zeros. That means we're getting controlled to 30 approach speed. And soon enough, we will be controlled to 10 in the approach. Here is the train coming from the opposite direction. One of the two trains that actually made us stop here. Now the 000 is on the KBB display. We stop the train. What I've seen in some videos is that drivers tend to switch on the brake neutral switch if they're waiting in front of a red signal. Yeah, and we have actually to wait. We can have a little look at the red signal here. What it looks like. In France, those light signals have this white rim around the board. They have a number of different color lights. Some stop signs or stop signals have 2 red lamps, some have 1 red lamp, and they have signs that identify the signals like NF and F. We will talk about this again. You can also see that little white light, the horizontale, and there is the number plate for the signal, and if it is an NF signal, it will always have this C indicator here. HA asks, what's the brake neutral button for again? It deactivates the handle for applying and releasing the brake. So the idea might actually be when you set the brake neutral button, then you cannot accidentally release the brake by putting your bag or whatever on the lever or hitting the lever when you're getting up. So even if you would hit the lever to release the brakes, then it can't happen because you switched the brake neutral button on. Yeah, time for a presentation, I would say. Here, my presentation. Again, apologies for butchering the French language. I wrote on the site where I got my ideas from. It is the Annex set for or to or of a certain arrêté where all this stuff is laid out, and I have tried to reconstruct that in a way that it fits into some form that is easily remembered. So this is our track, like always, and just as you have seen what happened to us now, we are stopped at a red signal with 2 red lamps that tells us to stop. The white light that can be shown here in this little indicator is off at the moment. Our signal that we are stopped does not have this extension on the right side. There are signals that have some additional lights here. Our signal hasn't. This does not make a difference. I just did not want to create too many different signal types in my presentation. So it is black. Don't care. Don't bother about this. That signal that we are waiting at is one that is denoted with a plaque NF, what means it is non franchisable. It is not passable. If you translate it from the French, that means on a signal of that kind, stop means stop. This is why we have 2 red lights, stressing the fact that we are really not allowed to pass it. It is not a stop and proceed, it is a stop and stay, a stop and remain signal, and it is called a Carré. This is why the number was preceded by a C. So this is the real stop sign if you want to have it like this. And sometimes it can look like this. So those 2 lights are either in a horizontal or in a vertical fashion, and they mean the same. 2 red lights don't pass it. Just stay there, wait for the signal to clear. Before that, we had green lights on the NF signal signs, the non-franchisable, the non-passable signals. With the green light, you will typically get shown the white additional light. This signal is called a feu vert, a green fire or a green light. That is quite obvious and self-explanatory. On other signals that don't have the NF but the F indicator, what means franchisable, passable, you don't have the white light, but you can also have obviously a green light on those signals, and those two mean the same. They are feu vert. You can pass them and proceed with the maximum authorized speed. And in between, like in so many signaling systems, there is the yellow light that warns you that on the next signal there will be a red. Also because you can pass it. If it has a white additional light, then it will be on when passing the yellow signal. If it is a F signal, a franchisable signal, then on yellow, obviously the white light will not be on because there is no way to show a white light. And this is called an avertissement, an announcement, a warning about the red light. So that is the typical sequence, and this is the sequence that we got in the game just now, and while we are waiting at the moment for the signals to clear. Yeah. What is it with our purple lights that we have seen in the station area? They are typically on signals that also have the NF, the non-franchisable, the non-passable denotation, and they are Carré signals as well. So those purple lights are just red lights like the others. You are not allowed to pass it. It is a stop and stay, stop and remain signal. It is called a Carré violet because it is the same signal, a Carré stop sign, but it is obviously not rouge, not red, but violet. And why the difference? It is a signal that is used in yard areas, on sidings, especially when getting from the sidings to the main line or passing from one track to the other in the siding area. So if you are more comfortable with the German system, every time you would encounter one of those dwarf signals, be on the ground actually or on a stick, that show the two red lights in horizontal fashion. What was in former times the light version of an SH0 and is now an HP1 signal. In situation like this in France, you would tend to get a violet version of the Carré signal, but the indication is more or less the same. You're not allowed to pass those violet signals. They can look like this. They can be dwarf signals on the ground. Typically they have the NF plaque alongside with them. So it is a Carré signal. You're not allowed to pass it. You have to wait for the signal to clear, typically then to a white light, not to a green light. But we will talk about the feu blanc in a different video when it is about shunting signals and route indicators, I guess. That is the Carré violet. The Carré violet has a special version if it is on a buffer block. So you might have seen that already when we are passing a buffer block, not like in Great Britain where you have the double reds or double whites on top of it, or in Germany you typically have a red lamp or a red square on top of the buffer blocks. Here in France you will typically get a Carré violet on the buffer block. What is in France in French called an heurtoir, if I pronounce that at all in the way that it is recognizable. An heurtoir, what if you translate it, it means a bit like a knocker, like a door knocker, or so the train can knock against the buffer block so that it does not run off the track. This is a situation where you get the Carré violet as well. Then what happens in situations where the yellow lamp, the avertissement signal, is very close to the red signal, so close that if you get the warning, you don't actually have a chance to slow down your train and stop in front of the red signal. Then you can get a warning before the warning, and then the signal in front of the yellow signal will be a flashing yellow. So the sequence will be green, flashing yellow, yellow, red. But this flashing yellow is only happening in situation where the signal showing the yellow is too close to the red signal, so that you can actually properly use it as a stopping and braking distance. And this signal is called a feu a clignotant, or clignotant, probably feu clignotant. Clignotant means flashing, blinking, and feu is the yellow fire, the yellow light, the flashing yellow light, obviously. So this means expect a yellow light with a shorter than normal stopping distance, so that you can actually start slowing down already. But let's put our avertissement back in its original position, where we have enough room like we had in our service here. Now let's on the bottom line collect our different red signals that there are. So we have seen the Carré, typical double red lamp on the NF, the non franchisable signal. We have seen the Carré violet that comes on normal signals or as a lamp on the buffer block. But what can we do if we want to, as a dispatcher, we want our driver to pass this red signal with caution? You remember that in the British and in the German system, alongside with the red signal, we can show those two white additional lights in a 45-degree climbing fashion that allowed, in Germany it was shunting services. In the British system, you were allowed to pass it with caution. Can we have something like this in the French system as well? Yes, we can. We can turn on the white additional light, and then at the same time the second red light will go off. And this reminds us totally at what we've talked about the old system in Germany until 1995, the distinction between the HP 00 and the HP 0 signals. When you had a red signal with two red lamps, it was an HP 00 blocking passage for train services and shunting services alike. And if you wanted to let shunting services pass with caution and slow speed, you can light the SH1 light signal alongside with it, the two white lights, and then one of the red lamps is supposed to go dark. It does not work in the game all the time, but in the rules it is clear that with the SH1 in German signals, the second red lamp would go dark, and here actually the same in France. So if you want to let a train pass here at an NF signal, at a non-franchisable signal, you can light the white light and then one of the red lamps turns off. That is called a semaphore. Then it is no longer a carré, but it is called a semaphore. And this white light is the œilleton, a very nice French word with this funny letter where the O and the E is contracted to one letter actually, and that means if you translate it, something like an eyepiece or a peephole, like a peephole in a door. We can look who is in front of the door, or an eyepiece on a microscope. So this is the œilleton, and if the œilleton is lit and the second red lamp is turned off, then you have still to stop in front of the signal, but then you can proceed on site with a maximum velocity of 30 kilometers per hour. So this is the semaphore on the NF signal. The easier version of the semaphore is on an F signal. An F signal does not have the white light that can be shown, so the red light on the F signal will always be only one red lamp and has the same meaning as the one red lamp on the NF together with the white horizontale light. So on the franchisable signal, we have from the start a situation where you have to stop and proceed on site. It's not a stop and stay, it is a stop and proceed with caution, 30 kilometers max, even without the white light accompanying it. So that is another version of the semaphore, and there are some special situations where there is not an F and not an NF on the plate, but an BM, what means block manual block, or PR, what means bloc automatique de permissivité restreinte, I think is the word. There is a special signaling system. I can't go into that properly here. Maybe we will find an opportunity to talk about this when it is actually modeled in the game. It has a semaphore, but you actually have to contact the dispatcher here, or if you can't reach him, have to wait 15 minutes before you can proceed on site with the maximum of 30 kilometers per hour. So those are the different versions of a semaphore. What is a stop and proceed signal? In the American systems, you have that a lot, stop and proceed on site. Yeah. Let's go back to our normal semaphore here with the F plaque, and then have it modified in a way that the red lamp is flashing. Unfortunately, see, the radar is not here because he is the biggest fan of flashing red lights. In the French system, we have a flashing red light that is called a feu rouge clignotant. We have seen it with the feu jaune clignotant. It is a flashing red light here. And what does it say us? We can proceed on site with a maximum of 15 kilometers per hour. So we don't have to stop in front of that signal, but we have to go really slow. On site, maximum 15 kilometers per hour. So sometimes you can find this flashing red in front of another red signal where you actually have to stop then to slow it down, or in other situations where you want to make sure that the driver is really cautious and not going faster than those 15 kilometers and approaching some dangerous spot with the appropriate caution. So let's make a bit more room on the lower part of the presentation so that we have room for our feu rouge clignotant. And the last signal, according to the rules, that can be found after a red avertissement is a dark signal. That is obviously not a signal that is supposed to be dark, but let's imagine something went wrong with the signal and the red lamps does not show. It is called a panneau éteint, a dark signal, a signal that went dark because of malfunction, for example. And obviously, if the signal is supposed to show a red, then the dark signal will follow the yellow signal. And like in most systems on this earth, a driver has to stop in front of a signal that is capable of showing a stop aspect and is for some reason dark, not showing anything. So err on the side, on the safe side, on the side of safety, and stop in front of this red signal. Yeah, this is what is in the rules specifically. So treat this as the worst aspect possible, and the worst aspect possible would be 2 red lamps and Carré. Another thing that you may not pass in the French system is this one. It is actually just a red stripe going from left to right in a horizontal fashion. It is called a Guidon d'arrêt. It is a bit like an SH1, an SH0 signal in the German system, a Sperrsignal. You may not pass it, but it is typically not a signal that you will be warned about with a yellow avertissement in front of it. It is in shunting areas. It locks the exit from sidings, typically the Guidon d'arrêt, and it replaces a hand signal that is supposed to stop you. The last signal in this context stopping sequence is that more or less. It looks a bit like the Guidon d'Arrêt, but only in yellow or orange. It is called La Bande lumineuse jaune horizontale, and is warning you that after the yellow entry signal at certain stations, you have less track than you might expect until you hit the red signal. So this is the short track indicator here. May it or be it because the track is shorter to begin with, may it or be it because there is a train sitting in the track and you are supposed to go in the track anyway, or be it that there is an intermediate signal in a stop position that prohibits you from going all the way until you get to the exit signal. So I've seen this in the game actually in connection with the TVM block markers at, I think, Aix-en-Provence. So maybe we will see this in a different video. Yeah, this is just a warning about less track than you would expect until you get to the exit signal at certain stations. And if you think back or might have seen our videos about the Swiss system N, we have found this orange or yellow horizontal bar on a signal that warns us that the track is occupied, that you have only a short track until you get to the next exit signal at certain stations. So we can see we can see some similarities here. That's the stopping sequence and the signals connected with the stopping signals and the stopping sequence that I wanted to talk about today. So you can see there is actually quite a variety of signals that require you to stop. The Carré is the typical one that does not allow anything to pass. Also the Carré violet that you encounter in sidings. The semaphore is the stop and proceed version of the red signal that can come with the horizontale on the non-franchisable signals, or with a single red on the FBM PR signals. The feu rouge clignotant is actually not even a stop and proceed, it is a proceed with caution signal. Like in the American system, it would be more or less like a restricted signal, where you actually have a flashing red sometimes for communicating that you are in a restricted speed area. And then the Guidon d'Arrêt, what you find sometimes on sidings that does not allow you to pass. And the stop sequence from green over yellow to red. Okay, thank you for bearing with me on the presentation. We will actually go back to the game. We will have a little presentation about the power change signaling later on when we pass this area. So we are back at our red signal. We know now why we got stopped here, and that this is a Carré signal. It is a non-franchisable signal, two red lamps, and the number of the signal is preceded by a C for Carré. So this is a signal that we might not pass, or we may not pass not even with caution. The thing is, in the ground are the balises for the KVB system, by the way, that would stop us if we tried to run the red signal. Quite nice scenery here with the motorway. I want just to move a bit along with the free camera while we are waiting. I think there is an old station area on the way to the power change area where we can see the Guidon d'Arrêt. First we can see here some Carré violet signals. Here the dwarfen version. You can also see the NF plaque. Here is the one that is actually elevated in the air. And I think this is the station area that I was talking about. And if I am not mistaken, there should be... yeah, there are two Guidon d'Arrêts on the sidings here. Here, the red horizontal bar that stops traffic coming out from this siding here to go on the main line. Or go onto this track that leads to the main line, because here is another signal, a Carré violet. Here is another train that we are waiting for, and that we have to let pass. So go back to our cab and wait for the train, and then we might actually get a green light and we can proceed. So typically, let's repeat this again, if you don't deliberately delay your departure at Marseille, you don't have to wait here with this service at the red signal. But since I wanted actually to have the stopping sequence in the video, if you delay that service for 1 minute, then you will have to let those two trains coming from the opposite direction pass. Why actually we are switching tracks here before we get to the power changeover location, I'm actually not quite sure. Now you saw the signal change. Guidon is lit. Signal switched to green. And here we have actually some speed signaling. Above the signal we get signaled the speed that we have to keep to when going across the switch. So it is a 90-kilometer switch. We can start driving again. Don't forget to release the brake neutral. We can clear the light, but that is not actually necessary. It will clear on its own when we're passing the valises. Now we can start our train again. Obviously we will not get full marks for the service because we are so late now. But this is not what we have been aiming for today. So I will only accelerate to 90 because 90 is the limit that we have to adhere to when going across the switch. You can see this is the switch that we are going across. So why we are going across the switch here, I don't know, because we are going back to the left side after the tunnel. Anyway, now we should be across the switch and can accelerate to the 140 that are allowed here. The power changeover site will be just past this tunnel, and I will put my camera in a way that we can do the power changeover move. We will run through this section without traction and without being able to use dynamic braking. So I will just have the train coast. As soon as we're out of the tunnel, I flip the main circuit breaker to on and off, and then I lower the pantograph so that it is lowered as soon as we are passing this sign here. Then we have to wait until the train has passed the whole area with its whole length. We can switch the pantograph mode to LGV here. Raise the pantograph again. And as soon as we are passing this signal, this sign here, ref, we can hit the arm button, and then you can see we are back on power, and then we can accelerate again. Looks a bit confusing actually, but it is fun to do. You can see now we are in the TVM, the cab signaling area, more or less at the same time after switching the power mode. We have a video about the TVM 430 system on the Javelin. I will make another one on the TGV as well, I think. But I won't explain too much of it today. Just a quick reminder, if there are numbers on diamonds, it indicates an incoming speed reduction to the indicated number at the next block marker, and when they are flashing, it indicates that there will be another drop in speed limit, like you see, to 230 at the block marker after it. But before we actually go and enjoy running this high-speed train on the TVM 430 system, I want to go back to the presentation for a couple of minutes to look at the signaling that we encountered for the power changeover. We did not actually see a lot of it because we were running so fast. But if you know what to look for, then you find it quite easily and you know when you can perform what action. The first sign that you should encounter, what you don't in the game when you're running in that direction, I have to admit, at least I have not managed to find this sign, is the baiser panto avertissement sign, the lower your pantograph announcement sign. So if you encounter this sign, it warns you that there will be a section of track where you have to lower your pantograph. By the way, why would we lower our pantograph anyway? Why don't we just turn the switch from 15 volts DC to 25,000 volts AC? Obviously, because there can be lightning arcs when the pantograph is... what is a pantograph, lol? Pantograph is that thingy that you can lower and raise to pick up the current from the overhead catenary. So that is that thing on the roof of the train that that can be extended and can be pulled back. Yeah, that is the pantograph. Panto, and actually the word pantograph comes from this scissor-like contraption that you sometimes used to have on oldish desk lamps that are mounted to the wall, so you can pull it towards you and push them back to the walls. So this double or triple or quadruple scissor alignment, and this thing is a pantograph in the original meaning. So this sign will warn you about a section where you have to lower the pantograph because you're going to switch the power mode. And this sign actually tells you here is the section where the pantograph must be down. It can no longer touch the overhead catenary, or there is the risk of something going wrong, and we don't want the sparks and arcs to fly around through the air. So at this point the pantograph needs to be down, and then at this sign it tells you the pantograph can be up again, but not before the whole train has passed this sign, because typically on a train like the one that we are driving on EMUs, the pantograph, or at least one pantograph, is at the rear end of the train. So the whole train has to have passed this area. And you can see there is a bit of room on this sign that is called the baiser panto fin, the end of this section, and it can also tell you what kind of current you have to expect after this sign. So in our situation here, we have to expect the 25,000 volts, or sometimes called the TGV power setup, for our high-speed train running. Like, I think we have 25,000 volts on the northeast corridor as well. Yeah, it's a bit more than the 15,000 volts that we have in Germany, and a lot more than the DC voltage that we get from our third rail. What we needed for getting to our 320 kilometers per hour high speed. And the last sign that we encountered was this board here. It is called a pancarte ref, a ref sign. And what does it tell us? On a push-pull train or a multiple unit, where typically the pantograph is at the rear end of the train, the tip of the train has to pass this sign until the main circuit breaker can be set to on, can be closed again. So after this sign, after the tip of the train has passed this sign, the driver knows he can go back to normal setup and go on with his train driving. So what would you do when you go through this sequence here? You need to know that between those two signs, the pantograph must be away from the overhead catenary. It mustn't touch the overhead catenary. It must be lowered until the end of train has passed this sign. So this is the objective. And then you have this this section until you get to the ref sign, until the tip of the train passes the ref sign, until you have until you can go back to normal. So what would you do? You encounter this sign here and you know, okay, I am approaching a section where my pantograph needs to be down. So I flip the main circuit breaker. I turn it, actually it should read off on, not on off, but you would flip it from on to off and then back on again. But I will change this in my presentation. I think it is the off-on flip of the main circuit breaker that disconnects the power. So we have seen that when setting up the train, just by switching it back into the on position, you won't close the main circuit breaker. You will just make the pantograph listen to you. And then you lower the pantograph by putting the pantograph selector into the 0 position, and then it takes obviously some seconds until the pantograph is retracted to the roof of the train, and this needs to be done until you pass this sign, and then the pantograph is down, and then there is no risk of arcs and sparks flying about. Then there is the section where the pantograph must be lowered. You can use this for selecting the power mode, switching the power selector from the 15,000 volts DC to the 25,000 volts AC or vice versa. And then your train passes this sign, end of train passes this sign, then you can switch your pantograph to normal again so that it rises up again, and it takes obviously some seconds until the pantograph connects again. You will see that when the green indicator with the 3 lines lights up, and then you tip of the train passes the ref sign, and then you can hit the rearm main circuit breaker button, and then you're back to normal, and then you can fire your throttle again and accelerate your train. So in my opinion, it is great that we have a section of this in the DLC, and it works really well if you go through this section here. The game will not remind you before passing the ref sign with this driver assistant indicator, whatever, to switch the power. So don't wait until you get the message from the game, until you lower your pantograph and change the power mode and get the pantograph up again, and then, because otherwise you will always lose a lot of momentum and cannot re-accelerate after this. So after this sign, flip the main circuit breaker off on, get the pantograph down, then you have enough time to select the power mode. Then after you are sure that your whole train has passed this sign, you can raise the pantograph again, and after passing the ref sign, hit the rearm circuit breaker button, and then you're good. And that was it with the presentation for today. We can go back to actually driving the train. Approaching a speed limit of 230, still accelerating full power. We will have to stop at Aix-en-Provence in 7 kilometers. From the flashing indication on the TVM, you see that we are slowed down even more. Now we are approaching a 200 limit, so I stop accelerating at this point and just let the train coast. Every time we have the train coasting, you see this purplish indicator lighting up again. Now we have to slow down to 160. For that I actually use some brakes. because just letting coast down might not be enough. And the next block marker will be here very soon. Here it is. Getting slowed down to 100 even more. We're still running uphill, so we can use the gradient. Oh, it has started raining. You can use the gradient for getting slowed down, but don't be deceived. As soon as we are past this hill here, then actually a thunderstorm again. Then we are running downhill in a decent fashion, so the train will start accelerate, and you have to hit the 100 reduction at the next block marker that is coming up now. Now the next limit is to 80. Can just leave the brakes on in the minimal setup. And a speed limit to 80 on diamonds is always an indication that the next indication will be a stop indication. On the TVM 430, a stop indication should always be preceded by an 80 indication or a 170 indication. So an 80 and the 170 on white diamonds flashing is like a yellow signal warning you about an incoming stop signal. And here is our stop signal. Obviously at the end of the platform. Maybe I was a bit fast. Coming in. Maybe you shouldn't go faster than 40 when you hit the platform. But to make up for it, I'm a bit slow now. Until we actually get into the parking position. Well, here we are. When we're sitting at the platform, I don't know, maybe press the brake hold and the brake neutral so that we cannot release the brake accidentally. I'm a bit far. Was not the greatest stop in history. But still. And obviously we are late because we had to let the two train pass. So 1 minute delay at the start of the service results in 9 minutes delay here. Close our doors. Make the brakes operational again. Release the brakes. Apply some power. Get the train moving. Actually, we need more wiper speed. You can see on those block markers the NF denotators as well. And maybe you have seen the Guidon, the white light that can allow you to pass those block markers even when they are denoted as NF. So we will get back to this when we are talking about the TVM 430. Now we have a limit of 170. That soon will increase, I'm sure. And now we have 67 kilometers until we get to Avignon. Increase to 300. Maximum authorized speed on this track here. A bit later on we will get in the section where it is 320. For the moment we can just go full throttle. Yeah, I will use this to show you. This is the pantograph HA, by the way, right? And what you can see is how the overhead catenary wire is always going from the left to the right, from the right to the left. Oh, you have seen some sparks on the pantograph. And why is that? That it is always going from left to right and right to left. This is not only because in bands you cannot design that in a different way, because there will always be a straight line between the two posts on either ends, but this is actually deliberate, because if it would always hit the pantograph in the same spot, then you would wear this spot on the pantograph and it will break eventually. So you have the wire go from left to right and right to left all the time to wear the pantograph evenly across its whole breadth. When you're in a high-speed section like this here and guided by TVM 430, you don't have to pay attention to signals that tell you to switch off the main circuit breaker and switch it on again. This is handled automatically by the train, because obviously you don't have Snowball's chance in hell to see those signs fast enough to react to that. Going uphill, you can see that we're going full throttle and still we are decelerating. But soon we will get to the summit and across the little hillock, and then on the other side we're running downhill. Now the accelerometer switched to accelerating, and we will have to use the brakes to not overspeed. In this situation there should be the increase in track limit to 320 soon enough, so that we only have to break away the peaks. Oh shit! Now I went across the 300 anyway. What I don't know is actually what you would do in real life. In one situation you would only use the electric brake by pulling back the power handle, and when you would actually use the train brakes, up to a certain limit, both of it works. For actually slowing down the train, you will most of the time need to use the train brakes, but for preventing it from picking up speed, sometimes it is enough to use the dynamic brakes alone. Oh, CD Radar, hey, see you, nice to see you on the chat. Is that a joke that you wrote there? Wegen der Deutschen Post musste ich den Zug der Deutschen Bahn einholen. Zum Glück hatte er Verspätung. Ich fange an, das System zu verstehen. Well, I will think about that later. What did the German mail to you, my friend? Well, the German mail was late, so you had to catch up with the German train, and it was late, fortunately. So it evened itself out. Well, today we are trying not to get too much of a delay on our French train, going with 320 kilometers towards Avignon. It is another Czech joke. This time I caught it from overspeeding. Again, just like this. But the route is really dynamic, so there are some descents where you are really picking up a lot of speed if you don't use your train brakes. It is a translated joke about the Czech system and the German system. Well, I think this happens in a lot of systems. If one thing is late, then it is great that the other thing is late as well, so that no damage is done. Unfortunately, you missed the part about the flashing red signals in the French system. Since you are a friend of the flashing red signals. It's amazing how the kilometer count drops and melts away when you're running with 320 kilometers. On other lines you would say, well, 30 kilometers, this is almost the whole line still in front of us. And here it is just tick, 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 ticking down. So this last part of the track is less dynamic than the first part. And the dynamic weather actually always gives us a thunderstorm on our streams recently. What I really love is this accelerometer on the speed clock on this train, just as on the Javelin. It's pointing up, pointing down. Only need to be careful with the power handle. It reacts very fast to pushing the buttons when you're using the keyboard to operate your trains, as I do. You totally missed the timing and the notification also failed. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm afraid that I have no influence on the notification, but I think I set a notification. Well, you will find the explanations about le feu rouge clignotant, the flashing red light, on the YouTube video, starting tomorrow evening or whenever I get around to do it. But I missed you. And so did AJ, I'm sure. TVM 430 announces a new signal indication, but we're still running on 320 maximum allowed speed. No flashing indications, but now we get the announcement that we are approaching a reduction to 300 again. There is a bit of weird indication. It switched to 300 maximum authorized, and again we get announced a reduction to 300. Now we are 300 maximum authorized again, with a reduction in the second block in front of us. Approaching the 270. And here we really have to use brakes because we're running downhill. So I will leave the brakes just on because we will still have to slow down even more. 230 at the next block marker. So what did you do at your Ministry of Transport? Filing a motion for adding the flashing red signal to the Czech and Prague metro signaling system, probably. Yes. What you can see very nicely is the funneling down the speed. We skipped the 170, so what is nice, so we are not getting a stop aspect out of the 170, but it went across the 160, 130. I think we will get a 100 and then an 80 and then the stop indication. Here is the ping, and then next one will be 100. I think this is the section where we're going down into a tunnel. That is quite a longish block, and the next block marker is at the end of the tunnel, so we can have the train coast a bit. And then slow down in the tunnel. Can have some lights, by the way. Prepared for the 100. Block marker will be at the exit, more or less, or shortly before it. Here is the 80. And as was to be expected after the 80, the stop. Now I want to try to slow down a bit more, and again I am late with slowing down and I'm too fast at the platform. When you hit the apply brakes lever, it will always go into a reduction of 0.5 bars automatically as an initial reduction. So almost there. In the end, I'm actually too short. So we have to have the train coast into the stop position so that it does not stall. But since we are that late, anyway, at least we get a 500-point stop. 4 bars, brake hold, brake neutral, and have the passengers get out of the train. Yeah, Aix-en-Provence, no, it's Avignon. We have been in Aix-en-Provence on the trip. You can see there are only 3 stations in this DLC: Marseille, Aix-en-Provence, and then Avignon. At least only 3 stations where the train actually stops. The PIS system is actually working. We have a retard of 8 minutes. We are 8 minutes late, but we are arrivé. We are actually made it. So this train will go on. Oh, it won't go on. I think it is supposed to go to Belgium, right? It says Brussels Midi. So it's actually supposed to go on to Belgium, but not in this DLC, unfortunately. Can watch the doors being closed. And that was our service, I guess. So don't worry about the session being invalid. It is because the servers are down for maintenance. So CD Radar, what did you say? A few weeks ago there was an incident when there was a malfunction on one of our signals, and instead of flashing white it was flashing red. Oh, it actually was a flashing red incident. I immediately remembered how I said flashing red is the weirdest thing, and then there I was with it. That is great. So what we are discussing on the streams here actually well, had its implication in real life, and you went to the Czech Ministry of Transport with it. I appreciate that. That is a nice story. I hope they were able to fix it then and have the red flashing light transformed into a white flashing light. Yeah. That was our stream for today about the TGV, the French signaling. There is enough material to fill a couple of more streams about the French signaling system, the French security systems. Obviously we only have this one DLC and we only have this one train, and we can more or less only go back and forth there. So I will see, and I have to see if we do that en bloc or if we find something else to do in the meantime. On the latest sale I picked up the Birmingham Cross City line. Maybe there is something that I can look into deeper, and I finally bought the modern version of the Isle of Wight DLC. So maybe we find something else. I had half a mind of talking about the camshaft drive in the 313, but we will see what we are doing, or what we will be doing on the next streams. But there will be some more French signaling stuff streams, and I really hope that there will be more French DLCs with more regular French signaling and signaling action, safety system action, apart from the high-speed running that we have in this DLC so far. Thank you very much for staying with me. Thank you, CD Radar, for your input. Thank you, AJ Black, for moderating the stream. And hopefully see you next week. Bloop. And now we are running out of the map, I guess, with this guy here. There is a second man seat, so I can actually sit down. At least if I find a way to use that seat. No, probably I can't use it. But then we will just have to use this view if we cannot use the externals, and see where we are going. So this is the part of the DLC that you cannot use as a player, but only the AI trains can do. I never went this way so far, so just let's see how far this route is represented outside of the playable area. This is actually the VACMA alarm going off. Okay, you have to press your pedal every now and then, but well, doesn't matter. We have reached the edge of the represented area anyway, and so this is it for today's stream and video. Thank you very much again, and see you next week. Bye bye.